Here we go in 3, 2, 1. Tell us a little bit more about the evolution of your career.
For the ripe old age of 24, I went into burnout.
Now, oftentimes being a double minority, you don't have the living room, locker room factor.
This because I tell folks, hey, you never know where your journey's going to take you.
I'd come from working at Accenture doing IT consulting.
Wow.
And this was really a humbling experience to make 150 cold calls every day.
The need is spectacular and there's nobody doing it.
As a society, we don't give enough credit to these different experiences we have. We want to make everything make sense.
Am I going to be grateful for everything that I do have, or am I going to focus on everything that I don't have?
I love helping people to see a vision come to life, but is this the best way for me to help people?
And I was like, you know what? I don't think I should be unhappy like this.
Tough people are greater than tough times.
And not everything's going to make sense, and that's okay. To the point that you're saying is where we build on these things that happen to us in life. You are such a great example of that. So let's dig into your story a little bit more. Hi, friends. Welcome to Greater Than Live. Happy Thursday. I hope you are ending the week on a strong note, and maybe you are looking for a little bit of inspiration to take you into the last day of the week, to take you into Friday, to take you into the weekend. Today, I am so excited because we have Family Forward NC, who's going to be joining us here on Greater Than. Their chief strategist, Emily Swartzlander, is here and we'll be taking your questions. So we are broadcasting on Facebook, on YouTube, and on LinkedIn Live. So if you're joining us, please pop into the comments, say hello, let us know where you're joining us from, and then feel free to ask your questions because we will be taking those on air today. If you're watching this as a replay, thank you for joining us in the replay. You can still ask your questions in the comments, and I will be monitoring those even with our replay. So for those of you who are employers, who are supervisors, who are hiring managers, this is the episode that you are going to want to pay attention to and listen to. Family Forward NC is a part of the North Carolina Early Childhood Foundation, and it is an innovative initiative to improve the health and well-being of children and their parents and to keep North Carolina businesses and workplaces competitive. It is an employer-led change to increase access to research-based, family-friendly practices, big and small, that improve workplace productivity, improve recruitment and retention, to grow a strong economy, and to support children's health and development. So I know so many of you right now, we're going to talk about this, post-pandemic hiring. It's kind of crazy, right? There's so much going on and you are looking for ways to improve your workplace. And today, I hope we will give you ideas. So I'm going to invite up to our stage Family Forward NC's Chief Strategist, Emily Swartzlander. Emily, thank you so much for being here today on Greater Than Live.
Thank you, Jen. I'm really excited about this.
I can't wait for this conversation. So a little bit of my personal background. I have been in-house counsel most of my legal career over the past decade. And certainly this question always comes up, right? Like how can we improve our workplace? What can we be doing for our team? And fortunately, Family Forward NC has a lot of ideas to provide employers, and we're going to get into those in our conversation. But first, fill in the gap for us when we have that broad intro of what Family Forward does. But why don't you tell us in your words, what is Family Forward NC?
Yeah, so Family Forward NC is a program of the North Carolina Early Childhood Foundation. And that's important, Jen, because the North Carolina Early Childhood Foundation really looks at everything that it takes to ensure that our state's children are set up for success. And the reason for that is because we know that if you get everything right, particularly in the 0 to 3, but really in the first 8 years of life, by the time a child hits 3rd grade, you have set them up for success for the rest of their life. Like, you've really given them the best possible chance. And one of the big pieces of that puzzle is how working parents are supported, and how working parents are able to then care for their children in that birth to 8, but really even when they're pregnant and when they are thinking about having a family. And so with Family Forward NC, we work with employers of all from all industries, of all sizes, to help them, inspire them, and help them then incorporate family-friendly workplace practices. And as you mentioned, big and small. So everything from, people automatically go to paid parental leave. So everything from paid parental leave as the big one, to how do you create flexibility or some childcare supports, or options for your workers that can not only help them, but can help you when it comes to attracting workers, retaining them, productivity, all those kinds of things.
Can you talk more about Family Forward NC, how this even got started, and what's the vision that organization has?
Yeah, so originally this actually got started because of my peer group and fellow working parents. Originally the idea for Family Forward NC came when I was on maternity leave with my youngest daughter, who is she's almost 6. She could tell you exactly how many days until she is 6, but roughly 2 months until she is 6. And when I was out on leave and really adjusting from going to 1 to 2 children, I knew I was at a place where I knew that I was fortunate. I had paid leave, I had backup childcare at the place that I was working at the time. I had all of these supports in place, and it was still really hard for me and for my peer group. And so I started to do some research about what was out there, or as it turns out, not out there, for workers in this country. And, that then snowballed into partnering with the North Carolina Early Childhood Foundation and really launching this work. And so it started from a place of need with working parents and hearing parents from all over the state. And now we have talked to and engaged more than 6,000 employers from all over the state. And you hear those refrains over and over again: childcare support, flexibility, paid leave, these things that help workers and then therefore help businesses, because it actually turns out that many of these practices are good for the business bottom line, because they help attract and retain workers. They lower turnover. They do all kinds of things that help keep your workforce in place. And then also, down the line, provides for that healthy start for children, which then impacts the workforce of tomorrow. So our goals are really threefold: inspire businesses, support the workforce now and create better supports for working parents and working families now, and then set up children for success later in life and support the workforce of tomorrow. So those are really kind of our 3 buckets. And the good news is that the data really shows that it's true, that this works, and it works really well.
Gosh, yes. And I've seen it firsthand, when people feel like they're coming to a workplace that truly recognizes who they are as a family person, not just as a professional, it makes a big difference. And to your point, it leaves that lasting impact on the kids. And such an interesting fact that you provided about how important it is that 3rd grade threshold really does make, I guess it can predict a lot about the future, how kids have been exposed to education, and how, everything that happens from birth to 3rd grade is just really vital in terms of kids' lives. So when we look at the trends, I guess you could say, but Family Forward NC has now seen quite a bit of change in the workplace, and probably over the past 18 months, so much change that my guess is y'all maybe couldn't have even predicted it. But what kinds of change and trends and maybe different issues are you looking at right now as an organization based on what professionals and families have experienced over the past year?
Yeah, so, heading into March of 2020, when everything shut down last year, we were in a very different place with our conversations with employers. Unemployment was very low. We talked a lot about attracting and retaining workers because a lot of businesses were having trouble doing that. And then it's interesting because it's actually kind of come full circle, right? Where again, employers are having trouble hiring for many different reasons. But I think what has happened in the last year is that, between now and then, is that COVID really exposed and turned on the lights to what a lot of working parents had been dealing with kind of behind the scenes for many years, and suddenly our kids were in our Zoom meetings if we were able to work remotely. If we weren't able to work remotely, the shutdown of childcare impacted the workforce greatly. 1 in 3 and by and large impacted women more. We know that 1 in 3 female caregivers had to leave the workforce and or reduce their hours because of childcare needs. And so, suddenly all of these things that we were kind of maybe barely managing before as working parents were now out there. For our employers, for our colleagues, for everyone to see. And I think that has really changed how people want to work and how people can work. We have seen that many businesses and companies that thought that remote work wasn't possible. It's 100% possible. We've been doing it. Industries that did not have paid leave, hospitality, restaurants were a big, is where we've seen a lot of change when it comes to paid leave. Industries where that just wasn't a conversation or really was just beginning to be a conversation. It's now a core part of what you need to provide. If you are a restaurant owner, you are thinking about paid leave right now, right. And have been because of COVID and all of the health risks that were associated with that. And so, in many ways, it has very quickly moved these conversations forward and into the spotlight in big ways, and I hope continues because there were conversations that we needed to have.
Yes, absolutely. So, because I can hear you saying, based on my experience, where you start suggesting things and like paid leave, right? That's something where in a business owner's mind, you might start seeing dollar signs and being like, how are we even going to do this? Is that a question that you find employers come to Family Forward NC to say, okay, like either I know I have to do this or I want to do this. Now help me figure out how to do this. Is that what Family Forward NC does?
Yeah, by and large, what we have found is there is interest and desire and want to support families and to support workers. Employers want to support their workers by and large. Where it gets tricky is cost and kind of, really looking at what are the upfront costs versus what will I save over time, and how, what's that return on investment? And also, quite frankly, sometimes it's just inspiration and trying to think outside the box a little bit and, really get creative with what you're able to offer employees. Many times, particularly, we work a lot in hospitality and manufacturing with small businesses. And we do that on purpose because oftentimes there's either not an dedicated HR representative, or HR is also doing 3 other different jobs. And so they just need resources and help. And, what is the step-by-step for how I set up a childcare facility in a manufacturing plant? What does that even look like? Because that sounds very complicated. It's not in my expertise. And so, oftentimes for us, it's really just connecting to peers, to other employers who have incorporated these practices and connecting to resources and opening up some of the conversations that you need to have with your employees, with your chief finance officer, with yourself, and kind of how you want to approach your business, and what you're doing for your workforce. And then, oftentimes we just kind of see it take off from there. It's really just that whatever that connection point is to the resources or ideas that you need, that seems to be a catalyst for change.
And I know, speaking of those resources, Family Forward NC's website has a number of free resources where if you're just starting to get interested, you can go on the website. Is that a first place you recommend people go when they start to have questions, or what would be the first step someone might take to work with Family Forward NC?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that we have done with our website very early in the work, the first piece of work that we did was to put together what we call our guide to family forward workplaces. And it identifies 16 different practices and growing that you can incorporate into your workplace, along with sample HR policy language, along with some of the the legalities behind what you have to offer for different benefits, along with case studies from other employers who have incorporated these practices, surveys for your employees, things that you would need, particularly if you don't have an HR department at your fingertips, that you can then kind of take and move forward. On top of that, and this is actually something that we launched during COVID. On top of that, we actually have contracted out with an HR firm called Performentor, and have started offering more one-on-one support for employers who need a little bit more than what the guide can provide, or who have an unusual circumstance or something where they really need to kind of dig in a little bit. Mm-hmm. Again, we've been focused on hospitality, manufacturing, and small business, and not exclusively. We just know that those are industries where we've seen there be a need for additional support.
Absolutely. And I think too, those are two industries that require a lot of creativity in order to figure some of those things out, because the point you made earlier about, establishing some of these family forward practices, family friendly work environments doesn't have to cost a lot of money. There are different ways you can do that. What are some creative ways that I don't know if you can share any maybe points from case studies or from clients that you've worked with, but what are some creative ways you've seen businesses transform into family friendly or more family friendly work environments?
Yeah, so I think beyond creativity with the actual benefit itself, what I will say is where I've seen people get really creative, where I've seen businesses get really creative, is with determining what they actually can do. Mm-hmm. For instance, there's a sandwich shop in Durham called East Cut Sandwich Bar that offers paid maternity leave. Wow. To its employees, which is unheard of in the restaurant industry, but they've figured out how to do it because they've determined that it's really important to them and their core values. There's a Katie Button who owns a couple of restaurants out in Asheville, has been very dedicated to went into her restaurant spaces and built out a space for breastfeeding workers to be able to have a separate space to pump, and to have, and that doesn't really that's actually one that we point to of talking about supporting workers, is really being supportive of breastfeeding workers and having a dedicated space. It doesn't have to be much. It doesn't have to be fancy. It needs to have a closed door and be quiet and private, right? Mm-hmm. And then backing that up with the time and the culture to support that. We've oftentimes in the restaurant industry, when you're on your feet, let's say you're working a double and you're on your feet for 12 to 16 hours, you need several break times to be able to pump. And, we've seen restaurants of all shapes and sizes kind of learn about that and really learn about the ways that they can not only offer that space, but enthusiastically offer that space and make sure that people feel supported. And that is a game changer. So one of the things I will say too is when it comes to creativity or kind of looking at lower cost or no cost ways, culture a conversation and an issue that comes up a lot for us. Having the practices and the policies in place, and then also having a culture where you feel comfortable, if you are a 20-something woman, talking to your 40-something male manager about your breastfeeding needs.
Yes.
You know?
And kind of just like a big hand raise if you've been there before, right?
Totally. Yeah.
And I was even thinking as you were saying that, all too often, especially small businesses, instead of being proactive with a plan, like take breastfeeding, for example, they kind of wait until the first person where it happens. And that unfortunate first person is the guinea pig to figure out like, okay, here's maybe where you can be pumping. So in my mind, everything you're saying, like I want to kind of shout it from the rooftops for small businesses, even if you don't have a woman who's in this situation right now, chances are you will as your business grows and thrives. And so go ahead and have a plan in place, right?
And I can tell you, if employees who are interviewing with you, and we know the data supports this, particularly if you're talking in the millennial generation, if you're talking Gen Z, they are looking for those policies and practices and culture in place, even if they do not have children yet. Yeah. From day one, when they are interviewing with you, they are noticing those things. And for two reasons. One, they may be thinking about themselves down the line. And also, those kinds of things are indicative that you care about your employees, and that you recognize that we don't put our families away when we walk into the workplace or when we log into a Zoom meeting. And that says something about you as an employer. Right. And we know that millennials in particular, but with Gen Z also, they're voting with their feet when it comes to where they will work.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of building on that with the data and the trends that we're seeing of people leaving the workplace right now, or maybe leaving careers that they've had and recognizing different priority shifts over the pandemic, what kind of reasons are you seeing for those people leaving? Or are there any trends that in addition to either retaining people or urging people to come to your workplace, why are you seeing people leaving their workplaces? Are there family reasons specifically around that too?
Yeah, so there's a mix of reasons. One of the big ones is childcare. There are still, before the pandemic, there were childcare shortages in the state, across the country. 99 out of 100 counties, and this is before the pandemic, in North Carolina were childcare deserts, which means there were 3 to 4 spaces available for infants and toddlers, but it also resonates for older children too. 4 spaces available for every, or 4 children rather, for every 1 space available. And that was pre-pandemic. And we know that the childcare industry is also facing a workforce shortage now. Mm-hmm. And so, availability of childcare, affordability of childcare has really impacted, in particular, women who have either left the workforce or cut back, and the timing of when they can consider going back, if at all. And we know that, childcare shortages are likely to continue, at least in the short term. And women having been out of the workforce, that will continue to impact them for years to come. So, childcare is definitely a factor, and supporting in any way that you can as an employer, supporting them with childcare needs or flexibility when you can, those kinds of things are important. We are also seeing, the highest number of workers who are leaving the workforce are, and this is according to the Atlanta Fed, are workers who have jobs where you need the highest level of education as a high school degree, and in that low wage category. And we're seeing that for a number of reasons. Again, one of which is safety concerns and kind of ongoing safety concerns because of COVID. Those are often jobs where you are reporting in person, and there's continued safety risk or perception of safety risk there. We're also seeing, quite frankly, those were jobs where people were needing to work 2 or 3 jobs to make ends meet, and they're reconsidering what they can and want to do, and are looking for higher wages and are looking for living wage, and and we're starting to see employers respond to that, and wages overall are increasing, and then again, it's I forget the exact statistic, but it's somewhere around 25% of workers want to remain flexible and remote and maybe never go back into an office. And so, we're seeing a lot of these trends where I think overall people are either, because of family needs, are needing to stay reduced or out of the workforce, or are simply thinking like, I want to rethink the way that I work and the industry in which I work, and what I want my career to look like. And they're responding, they're accordingly to that.
So what would be, obviously there are some perhaps symptomatic experiences an employer may face where they might say, hey, Family Forward NC, I need to create a space for breastfeeding moms. But what are some other maybe red flags or best practices that you recommend for employers as to when they may reach out to Family Forward NC to get some help on creating a more family-friendly work environment?
So oftentimes, if you're talking kind of about employers who reach out because of pain points, oftentimes it's because of super high turnover. And we will see, employers or industries where there is really high turnover. It gets to a point where, we've in some industries, the fast casual food is one of them. So turnover can get over 100%, which is something that I had to learn through Family Forward, but it means people quit before they show up for their first day to work.
Wow.
Yeah. And so when you've got that an average turnover, I know I keep going back to restaurants, but it's an industry I know really well. Average turnover in the hospitality industry is around 75%. And so when you've got that type of turnover, you start to look for ways that you can attract and retain workers and really keep them. And I think we're seeing that with some of the current workforce shortage. We're seeing that spread into other industries where turnover rate is super high. People are leaving the workforce for a number of reasons, and that starts to really hit employers at a pain point, where then it does become really, financially a challenge. The turnover rate in and of itself becomes a challenge because every time an employee leaves, you've got an average of 3 months of their salary to look for someone new, to train them, get them on board. And so even when you're talking about something like a paid parental leave, it's paid for itself.
Right.
By the time you're hiring one new person. And so, oftentimes that's kind of that's the pain point for where we see that kind of the red flag, the help, or the white flag, I guess.
For organizations that are not tracking or paying attention to their employee retention, it is such an important number to pay attention to. It can tell you so much about the workplace and the environment that they're in, and certainly help you pick up on trends in terms of how and why people are leaving. And to your point, your return on investment with your people, you figure that out. And most often it's cheaper to retain than it is to bring in new talent. So it's an important investment to have in your people. So let's say for a business owner who's listening today and they're like, you know what, you've said some things that I probably should ask Family Forward and see some questions about. What would it look like for them to get started with you? How should they reach out, and what would be the first step they'd take?
So I'd point people to the website first, because again, we've got a lot of free resources that are just there and available. You can kind of dig through on your own. It's just familyforwardnc.com. There are a number of ways through the website that you can sign up to get our biweekly newsletter, where we have a ton of tips and resources and, again, case studies. Oftentimes we've learned that employers learn from other employers. And that, so we tend to pack we tend to do a high number of case studies and really showcase what other employers are doing. So you can sign up for the newsletter there. Also, there's contact information for myself or my colleagues at the North Carolina Early Childhood Foundation to reach out if you need that more in-depth support. And we can get you connected with our rapid response, our COVID-related program, with our HR support, and really just get you started. And the other thing that I would say too is, for anyone who may be sitting there thinking, this isn't possible, trust me, it's possible. We can and will find a way to work with you and to help you get started, whatever that looks like for you.
That is awesome. Well, friends, join me in thanking Emily for being here today. Emily, I appreciate your words so much and just the insight you've provided, because I think too often we hear about family friendly just being for the big corporations, and everything we said today. It's, if you are a small business, you can be a family friendly business, and there are certainly ways you can improve that workspace for your team so you can keep them, which is the goal, right? Just to have a strong work team. So Emily, thank you again for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a pleasure.
All right, friends, I will be back Greater Than Live next Tuesday at 2:00 for just a few motivational 15 minutes with you. Until then, you're welcome to check out the website, jenhoverstead.com/greaterthan for all of our previous episodes. Here we go in 3, 2, 1. Just a little bit more about the evolution of your career.
For the ripe old age of 24, I went into burnout. Now,
Oftentimes, being a double minority, you don't have the living room, locker room factor.
this because I tell folks, hey, you never know where your journey's going to take you.
I'd come from working at Accenture doing IT consulting.
Wow.
And this was really a humbling experience to make 150 cold calls every day.
The need is spectacular, and there's nobody doing it.
As a society, we don't give enough credit to these different experiences we have. We want to make everything make sense.
Am I going to be grateful for everything that I do have, or am I going to focus on everything that I don't have?
I love helping people to see a vision come to life, but is this the best way for me to help people?
And I was like, you know what? I don't think I should be unhappy like this.
Tough people are greater than tough times.
And not everything's going to make sense, and that's okay. To the point that you're saying is where we really do, we build on these things that happen to us in life. You are such a great example of that. So let's dig into your story a little bit more.